All right, tonight, he is the founder and organizer of the Our Money campaign. He's also the pastor, the senior pastor of the Mount Enon Baptist Church in Clinton, Maryland. He's here tonight. He is, I think, one of the smartest people I know and have ever met. He has a radical idea about money that you need to hear. Welcome to the program, Dr. Delman Coates. So you have the Our Money campaign, right? Tell me what that is.
Well, the Our Money campaign is really designed to respond to a series of existential threats that I think we face today. We all know about the existential threat of climate change, right? But there are a range of other threats that are facing our community that I see as a pastor. There's poverty, right? Economic inequality. And more importantly, the existential threat of private and household debt. One of the things that I've seen is the way in which my members and folks all around the country work 40 to 50 hours a week to pay interest on borrowed money. I mean, people are literally awash in debt on a mortgage, car note, school loans, credit card debt, right? And that's just, to name some of it, let alone, payday and title loan companies, right? Yeah. So people are literally awash in debt. And so the Our Money campaign, and folks can find out information about the Our Money campaign at ourmoneyus.org, is an effort on my part to really help people to get free from the burden of household debt in part. It was really born out of my wrestling with the foreclosure crisis that devastated the community and county in which I pastor. Our county led the state of Maryland and leads the state of Maryland in foreclosures. And I wanted to understand, what is the root cause of this kind of economic pain? I found it to be morally reprehensible that the same financial institutions that caused the global financial crisis are 3 times larger now than they were in 2007 and 2008. And it seemed immoral for me for homeowners to get put out of their homes and banks to get bailed out. And so I was moved. You talk about passion.
They should be clapping right there, because that was good. I mean, that's,
you talked about passion a moment ago. I am really moved in a profound way to understand what's at the root cause of all of the social and economic pain that people feel today. When a patient is sick, the symptoms are real, right? But those symptoms may not account for what's at the systemic or root cause of what's going on there. And if a doctor wants to heal that patient, she needs to understand not just how to solve the symptoms and to provide symptomatic relief, but needs to get at the root cause. In the aftermath of the riots, Dr. King, in quoting Victor Hugo, said something that I think is really profound. Dr. King said, in essence, if a soul lives in darkness, sins will be committed. But the guilty one is not the one who commits the sins, but the one who causes the darkness. And I think our challenge today, there's a lot of challenges in our community, because what King is talking about is the difference between derivative injustices or secondary injustices and causative injustices. I'm very much driven to try to understand what's at the root cause of the inability of our cities to invest in public education and higher education, the inability of our federal partners to find the resources to provide a dignified job with benefits for every American that wants one, to end involuntary unemployment in America, to provide.
But let me ask you this. I'm sorry to cut you off. But because I want to make sure that we tap into the heart of what you just said. So what is at the root cause of those inabilities?
Well, I believe that what's at the root cause is the way in which we are unnecessarily relying on money created with interest as a debt in our society. Most people don't realize this, but almost most of what we think of and use as money in our society is created as a debt, is created by banks through private bank lending. And you may ask, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is when money is created as debt, what is put in circulation is the amount of money borrowed, the principal amount of money, but not the interest portion of money, right? And so people then are fighting, are competing and working for an insufficient amount of money. Now, let me sort of give an example. Imagine 10 people in a community that are each issued $1,000, for example, that they have to pay back at some interest rate, let's say 10%. Well, there's $10,000 in their money supply, $1,000 for 10 people, but they owe $11,000. Some of those people in that community are going to be unable to meet their obligations, not because they're lazy, not because they don't work hard, or not because they don't pray hard enough. They're going to be unable to meet their obligations because they are forced to exist in an economic arrangement predicated on structural scarcity of the money supply. It makes their economy a lot like musical chairs, where there are 10 people fighting and competing for 6 chairs. And if we want to change that dynamic, we've got to put more chairs on the stage. We have to have an economy predicated on sufficient money. And to do that, we need money to be created by the federal government without that interest obligation for public priorities, and to put public money in circulation so that the public doesn't have to rely on private bank money in order to buy clothes, food,
now let me stop,
fund education.
I'm going to make sure that we're drilling down.
Yeah.
You talk about sufficient money, right? And so make sure I got it.
Sure.
I'm a philosopher, not an economist.
You are way smarter than I am.
Not even close. But the concept is, if the federal government put more money in supply, people would not be fighting over the limited money that's here.
Sure.
And they would be able to manage and handle their own personal economies, not based upon debt.
Absolutely.
Because more money would be in circulation. Did I get it right?
Absolutely. Dr. James Galbraith, economist James Galbraith, says there are only 2 ways what we use as money can be created. It's either going to be created through public spending by the federal government, or it's going to be created by private lending by the banks. It is far more preferable. It is preferable for money to be created through public spending on public priorities rather than relying on money created through private bank lending.
So at the heart of your argument is that we no longer rely on banks, right? But tell me.
There is a role for banks, and the role for banks is to do what most of us think that banks do. That is managing deposits from savings, to provide a payment system for the settlement of debts and things of that nature. But the role of creating money is a public function. Money creation is a public function, like air, like water. And we shouldn't factor out that public function to a private institution to profit off of it. And so, yes, there's a role for banks, but the role of money creation is a public function. And the government of the people should create what we use as money for purposes in the public interest. Our campaign is about mainstreaming what is called modern monetary theory, which is about changing the way we think about something that's foundational to how the federal government creates money, and that's through deficit spending. You hear politicians all the time saying deficits are negative, deficits are bad. And that's because many of these policymakers assume that the federal government is like a household. Say this with me, Sean, and say this with me, audience. The government is not a household.
Is not a household.
See, MMT, or modern monetary theory, is about helping people to understand that while you and I need revenue first in order to spend, the federal government does not need revenue first in order to spend. If we go to war tomorrow, God forbid, if we were to go to war tomorrow, no one would say, which multimillionaires and billionaires are we going to tax first to fund the war? We create the money through public spending. And as long as we don't exceed the threshold of inflation, the federal government can create all of the money we need to address our greatest social and economic challenges. So health care.
You got to stop, because that's so good that somebody should be clapping.
I'm preaching way better than y'all saying amen.
Let me get our brother in. Tell us your name and tell us what you want us to know.
My name is Michael, and I just want to give a shout out. I'm actually from PG County.
Oh, wow. What part?
Yeah. Bowie, Maryland.
Bowie, right near my church.
Yeah. So my question, you brought up the point of creating funding from banking and federal government.
Sure.
Do you think that as far as schooling goes, college students and healthcare in other countries over in Europe and like Canada, they offer free health insurance or even free schooling? Do you think raising the funding from our government will have the same impact on us?
Absolutely.
It's a great question.
Thank you for that question, Michael. Thank you. There is no public priority that the federal government does not have the capacity to fund. And the way the federal government funds our greatest priorities is through deficit spending. Now, Whenever priorities in the public interest come up, politicians ask, where's the money going to come from? You hear it all the time on the presidential debates.
Right.
Where's the money
last night you heard
it. Where's the money for Medicare for all going to come from? Where's the money for a Green New Deal going to come from? They ask that question because they are locked into the idea that the federal government's ability to spend is like a household. But say this with me again, the government is not a household.
It's not a household.
Now you might wonder, how does the federal government create money? It creates money through deficit spending. And I want to give you an example.
Please.
If I'm the federal government, Sean, and you're a teacher, a public school teacher, and I pay you $500, right? And then I tax back $200, my books are now in deficit because I have spent more, $500, than I received in revenue. You got that?
Got it.
Now, even though my books are in deficit, your books are now in surplus.
Right.
And with that $300, you can go to dinner, you can go to the movies, you can buy a book for a class you're taking, whatever you desire to do. You can even tithe at your church. Because now your books are in surplus.
Right.
So my deficits as the federal government results in your surpluses.
Right.
Now, if my budget principle is to balance my books, in that same example, then I spend $500, but in order for me to be balanced, I have to tax out how much? $500, right? Now that my books are balanced, I can campaign around the country and tell people, hey, I'm fiscally responsible. Elect me as your new leader and president. The problem is your books are now zero.
Right.
You have no money, but you still need to get a meal tonight. You still want to buy a book for school.
Facts.
You still need to save to get rent or something.
Yes.
Where's that money going to come from? Okay? That's not a rhetorical question. Where's that money going to come from?
I have no idea.
You have it's limited choices.
Right.
You're going to rob someone,
right,
or you're going to borrow it.
Right. Back to
so the reason the American people are awash in debt is because the federal government has underutilized the power of money creation through deficit spending. Deficit spending for the public is a good thing. We should want the federal government to do more deficit spending because deficit spending is net public money creation. And we can deficit spend for public schools. Just imagine if our federal government had a principle that every public school in America over 25 or 30 years old should be rebuilt or renovated so that we don't have schools in Baltimore that don't have heat in the wintertime or air conditioning in the summertime. I mean, if we can rebuild ballparks every 25 years, why can't we rebuild schools every 25 years?
Yes.
And where's the money going to come from? Well, we don't have to tax Jeff Bezos for it or Amazon because taxes don't fund spending. We don't have time to go into that. But the federal government merely creates the money we need responsibly without exceeding the threshold of inflation to address our greatest priorities. Whether it's health care, we need to provide universal health care, not universal health insurance. We should not allow private entities to profit from public priorities. We should not allow private entities. We should not allow private entities to set up a toll road for public priorities.
Yeah.
We should fund that through public spending without the interest obligation. And if we do that, we can solve our greatest existential threats.
When are you running for office?
Well, I'm not. No, I'm not. I am fully content.
No. Yeah. I'm fully content. Did you hear the reaction when I said that? Don't you think he should run for something?
No. I am really passionate.
Yeah.
I'm really passionate, Sean, about educating the public, educating policymakers, faith leaders, civil rights leaders about the power of the public purse. The tagline of our campaign is change money, change the world.
I was just getting to that. What does that mean?
If we change the way we think about money, we can literally change the world. Right now, the fiscal policy framework leads us to think that money is scarce. This comes from the legacy when money was backed by gold, a scarce commodity, where all those pieces of paper had to have gold somewhere that backed it. And so the ability of the federal government to spend was constrained by that gold standard. But we went off the gold standard in 1971. But we still have this scarcity mindset. Think about it. You know, when you're a kid and you want to buy some new shoes and new coats, your parents said, do you think money grows on trees? Well, here's the thing. For the federal government, money really does grow in trees. Actually, it's even easier than that. It's easier than that because if you plant a seed for a tree, you have to wait for it to grow. Money is just a digital entry into a computer. And if we change the way we think about and understand money, we can literally change the world.
Wow. So it's moving from a scarcity mindset
to an abundance.
To an abundance mindset.
Right.
The government has within its power responsibly
responsibly
to print all the money we need to address the problems that are plaguing this society.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, in a few moments that I have left, is this socialism?
This is not socialism. This is about maximizing the full extent of our current market economy. Socialism, as I understand it, is about lowering the ceiling on society. This is about raising the floor. This is not about saying private business is wrong or that industry is wrong. No, but it is about raising the floor. We do not have to have a society where there's poverty, inequality, where there are these two different school systems where if you live in some communities, you have great schools and great athletic facilities and others that are horrible. It's about raising the floor. It's about maximizing the full extent of our current economy for the benefit of everyone so that we have a win-win economy that works for us and not against us.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
This is
it's
radical.
Really moved me in a profound way.
Clearly.
Yeah, and I'm so excited. Right now, the Our Money campaign is going around the country doing trainings with professional organizations, civic leaders, civil rights organizations, even members of Congress. We've got a big meeting next week where we're bringing in our economists to meet with members of Congress on the House side and the Senate to talk about modern monetary theory so that we can get out of this scarcity mindset that makes us to think that public priorities are held hostage to some billionaire funding it with their taxes. Why should whether my kids eat or whether we have health care be held hostage to whether someone with the means pays the taxes for it?
So that is you can clap, it's fine. So that it's no longer that public policy and public priorities are funded by taxes.
No. Taxes don't fund spending, right? Say this with me, taxes don't fund spending. If we start a government right now, right? If we start a government right now and we say, oh, we need great schools, we need great highways, roads and bridges, health care for everyone, and we establish an amount of money needed for that, we can't tax the people, the audience, yet first until we create the money, right? We have to create the money first and put it in circulation so that the people have the capacity to then pay their taxes. There's a role for taxation. It adds a value to the currency. It helps to manage inflation and provide price stability. It helps to deal with moral hazards and stuff like that to manage oligarchies. But taxes don't fund spending. Spending provides the capacity for people to then be able to pay their taxes.
So just put the money in circulation.
All of these debates about how we're going to fund Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, a federal job guarantee, which is the unfinished legacy of the civil rights movement. Dr. King led those folks on that March on Washington. The full name of the March on Washington was a March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom.
I got 30 seconds.
It was about fighting for a dignified job with benefits for every American that wants one, and we don't have to hold those priorities hostage to taxation. We can create the money for it.